Hello, my name's Pat Lohr, and I'm a mathematics consultant with Edmonton Public Schools and the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium. Today I'm going to be sharing some ideas that you could use to help prepare your students for the PATs in mathematics and specifically in grade 3 math. I think that you're going to be able to use these ideas with your students all year round as a way to engage them in great math thinking. There are lots of good math questions out there. You have sources, including your textbooks. Typically, finding the problems isn't hard. What's hard is figuring out how to use them with your students in a way that catches their interest, engages them, gets them thinking deeply about the math involved. The problems I'm going to be sharing with you today come from the released materials on the Alberta Ed website. You may be familiar with them already, but if you're not, you could Google Alberta Math PAT and follow the links. You'll find them quite easily. I'm guessing that you're already using these problems in a variety of ways with your kids. Over the years, I've used them in plenty of different ways. Unfortunately, one of them was running off packages of multiple choice questions for my kids to do as a practice test. I'm thinking not much learning went on during that little exercise. Something a bit better was presenting the problems one by one as a bit of a warm-up. We could have a look at the problem and the possible answers and talk about it as a class and share strategies. That's a little better. Another thing I've tried is printing those problems off on cards and then letting the students work on them with a partner. Again, it's not bad, but I think we can do better than that. So let's start by looking at one of the problems. This particular one comes from the 2008 release materials, and you can see it's classic school math. Bob's buying 2 ice cream cones and he's spending $4. All we need to do is figure out his order. Your strongest students are going to spend about 10 seconds on that, and then they're going to have their answer and they won't have done much math thinking at all. Then what about those weakest students? Well, they don't want to think about it at all. You know what's going to happen. It's, I don't get it. There's too much writing on this. What time do we go home? They've got an elastic in their desk and they're a little bit distracted by that as well. I think what we need here is a Dan Meyer makeover of the problem. Now, if you've never heard of Dan Meyer, he's a high school teacher, and you need to promise yourself that you're going to check out his 10-minute talk on why math class needs a makeover. Our thinking on the math team around problem solving has definitely been influenced by Dan's ideas this year, and I'm not going to feel hurt if you decide to pause my presentation and go take a look at Dan's video. If you Google Dan Meyer TED Talks, you'll find it, and don't worry, I'll wait for you. There, I told you it was worth it. Let's get back to the math. My first step is always to think about the pieces of information in the problem and maybe which order I'd like them to be presented to the kids. Of course, I don't need to follow the order that was there in the original problem. I'm hoping you can see the change that I made from the original to the makeover version. I know it doesn't look like much, but let me show you what I'm going to do with it next. Here's the secret, and to me it completely expands the power of the problem. Don't give the whole thing away right at the start. I've used the screen shade on my smartboard here, and I've covered up everything except that very first piece. Bob spends a total of $4. So I would say to my students, Bob spends $4. I wonder what he spent it on. If you had $4, what would you buy? And what do you think happens at that point? Everybody in my class, from my very brightest light to my biggest challenge, is able to contribute to this conversation. They're part of the community and they're interested in what's going to happen next in this problem. I'm guessing even you are a tiny bit interested. What it's about is engaging your students in the math. I think we'll agree that kids are curious creatures, and math is just one beautiful way to help them understand or make sense of their world. I used this problem recently in a grade 2-3 combined class, and at this point, every single kid in the class was right there with me. They were thinking about the math behind the situation, And we even had a quite interesting conversation about what it meant by a total of $4. Did it mean that he could get a little change from that, or maybe he spent a little more? But in the end, the class decided that no, that meant it had to be exactly $4. So now we can take a little bit of time to explore the math. How much ice cream do you think you could buy with $4? Here's some information that might help you out. A small ice cream cone costs $1. So what do you think a medium ice cream cone might cost? There it is. A medium ice cream cone costs $1.50. Well, now we're thinking about a large ice cream cone, and at this point I want you to turn and talk to your partner about how much you think a large ice cream cone might cost. Wow, $2. Were you right? How did you know? Okay, so next, what do you think an extra large ice cream cone is going to cost? Oh, darn it. Sorry, there is no extra large size. Never mind, let's see what we can figure out from this. So now just to remind you, let's take a look at the original question and compare it to where we are now. So think about your own class, your own students. You know, it's math and it's beautiful. There's actually 4 possible ways that they could spend exactly $4, and the bright lights in your class are going to be working hard to find every single one of them. Even those struggling students that you have, well, some of these answers are pretty straightforward and they're going to be able to come up with at least one of them. It's math and everyone can play. Oh yes, you're going to need one more hint before we look at the answers. At this point, everybody in the class is kind of excited because they're pretty sure that they know exactly what Bob ordered. Seeing the actual question and the multiple choice answers at this point is pretty cool because we've already figured it out. And there's our answer right there, large as life. Now, if you want, you have that opportunity to talk to your kids about all of those issues around multiple choice problems. You know, what do you do if your answer isn't on there? Or are there answers there that you know aren't reasonable and you could just cross right off? This is not a hard process, and we're going to look at a few more examples just to give you an idea of other things you could do with the problems. Here's one about a camel. So what I'm going to suggest is just give them the picture of the camel. There's lots of math around a camel. Get your kids talking about that and thinking about that. I wonder what math questions you could ask about a camel. Then, if you want, you can give them that next piece of information. Here's something specific, and we could come up with some questions around that. For another example, I've got a math problem here with a graph showing the number of kids that have come to a playground. Now with my class, I would start them off with the graph only, and we would begin by speculating about what this situation might be. What can you tell from the graph? Why do you think they're counting those kids? Where could this be happening? Then, when we find out what the graph is actually representing, we can start thinking about questions that we could answer from that information. Here's one last example. This time it's got a pictograph, and I am not going to be very generous here. I'm only going to give them the title of the graph, and then let them think and talk about that for a while. If you've got time, you could let your students do a little bit of research if they're interested. See what they can find out about the insects that a frog might eat daily. How could you represent that information that you've collected? Of course, then we'll look at the graph itself, and there are lots of math possibilities there. So there you have it. Thank you very much for choosing to spend the last few minutes with me. I hope that I've given you some ideas that you can use to help make your students problem posers as well as problem solvers. For the last word, I'm going to go right back to where we started, which is Alberta education. In our program of studies, it states, problem solving is a powerful teaching tool that fosters multiple, creative, and innovative solutions. I hope I've helped you see that preparation for those dreaded PATs can be accomplished within the framework of excellent problem-solving activities.